lovely souls. My name is Jackie, and welcome to the Raven Rabbit Wellness Studio podcast. I'm an enrolled member of the Washoe Tribe of California, Nevada. I have always been deeply connected to the unseen spiritual world since I was a child. I wouldn't say that my spiritual awakening can be pinpointed to one specific date, time, or event, but rather it was a natural unfolding over my lifetime. And I want to share that journey with you to let you know that your spiritual awakening is divinely guided. If you want help with self-worth and self-doubt, then this is the place for you. I took baby steps to change my life and heal from anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Ultimately, I built Raven Rabbit in my quest to help others like you do the same. I am a metaphysical minister, energy healer, and intuitive coach. In this podcast, I draw on metaphysical principles, I read energy, and I intuitively guide our conversation with the holistic, indigenous, spiritual approach to life, healing, and happiness. Stick around to explore the unseen, navigate metaphysics to live your life to the fullest, be the happiest version of yourself, and to deeply heal from what holds you back. Hello, and welcome to the Raven Rabbit Wellness Studio podcast. I dive deep here into the realms of metaphysics and my cultural upbringing being American Indian. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Jackie Cope, and I'm here today to explore some common questions I frequently receive about the fascinating topics of metaphysics and my American Indian background being Washoe. Whether you're curious about the mystical world of metaphysics or you're just navigating the complexities of your multicultural upbringing, you're in the right place here. We're going to dive into some of the most common questions I get. I have 10 common questions I get asked about for my metaphysics journey and my cultural upbringing. And this is episode 21. I'm so happy you're here. If you've been curious about spirituality, metaphysics, your cultural background, this is the place for you. And we start diving deep into some of those concepts and thoughts that you might be having and questions you may be having. So again, episode 21, 10 common questions I get about metaphysics and my cultural upbringing. So I'm going to put this in two segments. The first segment is about the metaphysics. The second segment is about my Washoe background and heritage. So, common questions I receive about metaphysics. We're going to dive just right into it today. Question 1. What exactly is metaphysics? That's an age-old question that's been around for a long time. Metaphysics is often misunderstood, so I want to be clear here with my philosophy of metaphysics. And if you go to each metaphysician, we're all going to have our own way of saying it, but it boils down to the same principles. So essentially, it's a branch of philosophy that we like to explore the fundamental natures of reality, existence, and being. We're questioning all of those things and exploring it. It really dives deep into things like your consciousness. I talk a lot about consciously doing things and subconsciously doing them or knowing them. It gets deep into our existence here, and there's lots of philosophies around that, and the nature of reality itself. So those three things in themselves are each all their own huge concepts to explore, and every metaphysician will have their own unique story around consciousness, existence, and the nature of reality. So that's what makes metaphysics so fun too. It's really about that personal journey. We're all sent here to have our own personal experience, which adds to the collective. It's like peeling back the layers of existence to uncover the deeper truths that lie beneath. And those layers of existence we can think about as a whole, as a society, and just individually, as we individually go through our experience and our soul's purpose. In a nutshell, to me, metaphysics is a philosophy, and it continues to grow and expand as we raise our consciousness as a society and personally, because maybe you've never heard about any of this stuff. Maybe you're just dipping your toe in the water. As you peel back that layer you're raising your own personal consciousness into this veil. Question number 2 I get asked a lot. How does metaphysics differ from spirituality? Because sometimes we use those words interchangeably, but they are really quite different from one another. So while metaphysics and spirituality are intertwined, they're not quite the same. Metaphysics is more concerned with the underlying principles and structures of reality, which is, for me, I've talked about how I'm in education. I really love that academic, concrete background. That's really something that I like, that structure. With spirituality, however, it involves more of your personal beliefs, your practices, and experiences, and you can't forget your culture. So spirituality is very personal for each and every person. Metaphysics is just your blanket overall philosophy, and it has the principles and the structures to it. Spirituality is often usually aimed at connecting with a higher power within yourself as well, which metaphysics does, but in a more structured way. Spirituality can do that through cultural ceremonies, rituals, tasks, things that we do that maybe are unique to our family. In essence, metaphysics provides the framework of what we're doing, while spirituality offers the journey, which I think is so beautiful. So, question number 3. Can anyone practice metaphysics, or is it reserved for certain individuals? This a very big and important question, because maybe you'll think, I wasn't raised with anybody who's remotely spiritual, whoever talked about metaphysics. Maybe you feel like you're not allowed to practice this because you weren't raised with it. And that is absolutely not true. Anyone can practice metaphysics. It's that, like I said, it's the principles and structures. It's that academic standpoint. And like I've said, I'm at University of Sedona learning about metaphysics. I already finished my bachelor's, but I've been working on my master's and doctorates, and it's really meant for anyone. The difference is when we start talking about cultural appropriation and those things, that's when we're getting more into spirituality, and we're talking about certain ceremonies, rituals, practices, and we need to be careful in those that we choose because we want to honor our cultural background and make sure we're not dishonoring other cultural backgrounds when we do those things, or if we even should do those things. So that's a big question. But if you're just going to practice the principles of metaphysics, it's definitely meant for anybody. You have to go through your spiritual journey yourself and figure out what's appropriate and not for you and for society. So an example for me in that is anyone could be a metaphysician, and you can study metaphysics. Where I start to not so much draw the line, but start to ask a lot of questions is when people say they're practicing shamanism. Shamanism is, I've done research on this, not a ton, I'm not an expert, but I start to question more. And it's more of a South American spirituality, cultural practice. So for me, just because I'm Native American does not mean I can start running around and claiming to be a shaman. That's where that needs to be very clear and very different. I have to look at my tribe and say, did we have shamans? And the answer is no, we didn't. So for me, I feel like I can respect that. I love to honor it. I love to watch it with people who have that lineage of being a shaman. But we have to be very careful with that. So that goes back to question 2. What's the difference between metaphysics and spirituality? So you have to start thinking about that to find your path. So with metaphysics, there's no prerequisites to become one. It's not an exclusive membership. Anyone can start diving into metaphysical practices and studies. It's all about curiosity, exploration, and a willingness to expand your understanding of the universe. You could be a big-time philosopher and study this, or you could just be a newbie and just so curious and wanting to know. There's always a place for you in metaphysics, and when you find good spiritual coaches and things like that, they'll meet you where you're at. And if you don't feel like you're being met where you're at in your learning, maybe question who you've asked to help you. So, because we're always here to help you and meet you where you're at and honor your cultural background and spiritual upbringing. So, question number 4. Is metaphysics compatible with science? So, this is a debate. While some may see metaphysics and science as opposing forces, they're actually more complementary than one might think. Metaphysics explores the deeper questions that science may not yet have the tools to answer. And I used to always think this when I was younger. Growing up in America, default religion here is Christianity. And so I would refer to the Bible. It wasn't like I was raised in a Christian household. I was allowed to explore whatever I wanted. I was very fortunate and privileged with that. But I would default to the Bible. It was on hand. It was in the house. And I would always say, just in my mind as a young kid, whatever science can't answer, I'll bet the Bible can. And now that I'm older, I realize same thing here now that I know more fully my American Indian background and being metaphysics. Like, what science doesn't have the capabilities to do right now in the 3D world we're in, our spirituality and metaphysics can come through and start giving us answers, or give us the tools to start figuring out the answer. Because science is a very complicated subject, and just coming up with how to do an experiment or what tools we might possibly need or research we might need to know, that's all a step in a process of finding the answer. So really, it's all about finding a harmony between the two disciplines of science and metaphysics. And last question I get asked a lot in this first segment, question number 5. How can I incorporate metaphysical principles into my daily life? I love this question. It's where the magic happens. I actually wrote a whole course about this. So if you're really interested in learning how to do this in your daily life, you could check out my website, go to Mystic Rise. The course, part 1, is about how to unlock your spiritual journey. So you can start integrating metaphysical principles into your daily routine, and it can enhance your sense of connection, purpose, and well-being, whether it's through meditation, mindful practices, or just simply being more open-minded, such as listening to podcasts like mine. There's countless ways to infuse your life with metaphysical wisdom, and it's up to you to start opening the door to that. If you're ready to dive in, though, I think my course would be perfect for you in figuring out how to get this going in your daily life. How do you sustain it beyond just being curious? Or if you've fallen into a slump, let's say you're a metaphysician, you've been practicing and life got in the way and you've been busy pursuing goals and such. So it'd be a great way for you to come back to your spirituality. So segment number 2 gets a little bit deeper. I get a lot of common questions about my Washoe upbringing. I'm putting cultural upbringing because this is meant for anybody with any culture. I just can share my experience being raised by my Washoe family and my white side of the family. So, question 1. What was it like being raised as an American Indian and white household? So, for me, growing up in a household I had a white dad and I have an American Indian Washoe mother, and I wasn't so close. Family was harder growing up, but I did know my family. And as I got older, we got really close to our American Indian family back home. My mom was always very close to my great-grandfather, whom I'm named after, and was sent up there every summer. On my dad's side, my dad was the youngest of many siblings, so it was more of an age gap issue there. So being raised in that household, fortunately for me, I was able to ask lots of questions. I got to ask all the questions. I wasn't forced to attend church or to acquire any type of religion. I was allowed to question it. If I had a friend going to a church, I was allowed to go because my parents didn't see the harm in learning the basic overall spiritual concepts of what would be taught to me. So as a child, my Girl Scout leader, she was Mormon, so I went to a lot of Mormon services. One that I gained a lot from was my grandmother on the white side. She moved into the duplex we owned next door, and she was Christian Science, so I would go to those because she always offered. She wanted me to go more of that structured. You should go, but my parents didn't force me. I only went when I said, hey, I feel like going. And I was also very bribed with going to McDonald's afterwards. So I would go, and I enjoyed that a lot. I mostly like just learning from my grandma, though, versus going to church because she had Christian Science as her philosophy and background. But when we would talk spiritually and through her experience, I gained a lot more from that. When I went to college, I made a lot of Jewish friends. So I asked all the questions. I participated in their families, Seders, Passovers. I loved it. I thought it's so beautiful. I love watching the ritual and traditions of the Jewish culture. So for me, I have a lot of love and admirations for all the structured religions. My first marriage, they were extremely Christian. It was more of that forced, you have to go, you need to go, or you're not saved. I'd have an affinity for that didn't resonate with me so much. I did like the church I went to at that time, and that was just your non-denominational Christian church. Finding metaphysics, though, without all of those things, I would have never questioned and found metaphysics, because now when I think about my American Indian side, I got taught very differently than what I was taught in those church settings or traditional settings. My American Indian grandmother would share stories with me, and that's more of how I was taught storytelling. My grandma would tell me a story. Now that I'm older and can look back, sometimes she didn't finish the story. Sometimes I had to figure out the point of the story, and all of that's very purposeful in American Indian, like oral traditional storytelling. And at the time, I just thought she was not telling it to me or didn't know what she was doing, but I think it was very strategic. And then same thing with her brother, my uncle, when we would go up and visit them, where my family's from, Lake Tahoe area. He would tell me, he was very purposeful in his storytelling. He would tell me all kinds of stories. We'd wake up and go fishing in the morning, just him and I. I'd wake up in the morning, and he'd drink coffee, but I would just be up because I'm a morning person, because I was young then, and just drink juice or whatever. And he would tell me all kinds of stories, and he would always say, you need to know this story. And he would then tell me whatever story it was, whether it was a story from his childhood that he experienced, or something that my grandfather did that he taught him that he needed to teach me. So, very different backgrounds. And it was very interesting to be raised in that way. I really definitely had to navigate two worlds. They each had their own traditions and values and perspectives, but ultimately it shaped me into who I am today. And I have a deep appreciation for both, which also helps me relate to clients who may come from a very structured church upbringing. I understand it to an extent. I don't understand the forced part a little bit because I was married into it, but I was taught to question, and so I did. So I have that support system though behind me to do that. And it helps me also with my BIPOC clients as well, because I understand how you may have been taught in such a different way versus mainstream white society expectations. being Native, you're taught in that oral tradition, and a lot are. Like, I think I had such an affinity for my Jewish friends, because when you do Seder and stuff, it's a big story, and I really loved it. I loved hearing that story, and then the purpose of that, like what you're supposed to take away from that. So I have an affinity to storytelling with cultural upbringing. So it really does help me, and it has made me who I am and got me to where I'm at now. And I would not change any of that. Question number 2. How did your cultural upbringing influence your worldview? So my cultural upbringing served as a powerful lens through how I view the world today. Again, it goes back to that walking in two worlds part. It influenced my worldview in a way that it affects my personal life and my professional life. So within my professional life, I saw the inequities happening around me to my BIPOC students and Native students, especially my Native students. And if you don't know what BIPOC means, it means Black, Indigenous, people of color. It's not the best term, but it's a quick one I like to use. But where I'm at now, I saw a lot of inequities happening to my Native students and stuff. And because of how I was raised to speak up and question. And my upbringing did influence my worldview professionally, because I see the inequities happening in the education system. And it just instilled in me this profound respect for diversity, and to have an awareness of our interconnectedness, because I was raised in both worlds. It also gave me a deep reverence for the wisdom of my ancestors, because from my American Indian side, stories are always like, this is what Grandpa Jack taught us. This is what's important. And those stories coming down from the American Indian side, like traditional stories and the way my family lived, is so important. And so it definitely influenced my worldview. It so much so that I pursued becoming a human rights cadre trainer with the teachers union. It also inspired me to do a Native American Indian club through my mom's encouragement as well at the school. So my worldview was definitely affected by how I was raised, because I can see, here's the main point I was getting to, I can see mainstream white and how we just take things as status quo. And there's a whole article that I love about that, and how racism is built into our society at a systemic level. But then I can see the other side, where I understand how all of that's wrong and what we need to do to break that, so that we can all be profoundly ourselves and value and appreciate all our uniqueness. So definitely gave me a unique worldview. Question number 3. What advice do you have for individuals navigating multicultural identities? So I think this is what can set me apart too in this industry when I think about my clients. If you are a multicultural person, whether you have two cultures like me, I say two because my white side, I've asked, they don't know specifically where they came from and all of that. So, they're just American white. They've been here for a long time. And then the other side is Washoe. Very clear. We don't have any other tribes within that lineage, because we kept to ourselves as a people, like my grandparents did. We were very isolated because of geographically the Sierra Nevadas. So I have two. But most people who are multicultural tend to have lots of cultures. And so advice I'd have for them navigating their identity. And my best advice is simple. Get to know who you are. Like I just told you. I went to look for those questions, and on the white side, it's not so much there. There's a little bit of knowledge. They know what states we came from. But like when I think about my native side, we know I could start going back into lineage. When I talk about Grandpa Jack, he's technically my great grandpa, and we can go back to my great great grandparents, and that's when Grandpa Jack started writing all of that down, because again, it was more oral. So get to know who you are and where you come from. And for me, my other advice on that is do it through your family if you're able to talk to them, if you can have those conversations. Because to me, there's just so much power in getting that from your family versus all these online providers that give you that. But sometimes we have to resort to that when we need to. I've listened to other podcasts where the individual talked about he got connected to a great grandmother from one of those online platforms, but then he went to talk to her directly. That's the most important thing you can do. It was he went to visit her. She was in Mexico, and that's where you're going to get the most. You could look at it on the computer and say, oh yeah, I'm this race, but that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot until you can go back and talk about your ancestors, living and non-living, of what they taught and who you are as a family unit. So, individuals navigating multicultural identities get to know who you are, where you come from, and what your family believed. Oh, I've also been watching this girl on TikTok, psychic medium, black woman, amazing. She was talking about when we look at our past and history, there's a lot of turmoil that can be there. She specifically was talking about racism and things like that. So if we look into our white side of the family, you know, they could have been condoning racist acts that we now would be astonished by. And we need to be aware of those. And then we need to ask ourselves on a spiritual level, if you're there, you know, are we going to call those ancestors in for ceremonial work? Things like that. Those are all questions you should be asking yourself. For me, I know who my family is. It's not a shock, but I was raised to know that. Some of us were not. And then a lot of my stuff got lost too with my Grandpa Jack. He was born in 1899. And so through the early 1900s, he wanted to assimilate because of just the turmoil in the Carson Valley at that time, and the discrimination and fight for life and assimilation. So a lot of our things in our family history is missing, unfortunately, because he did believe in just trying to get along. Well, now, you know, my uncles, my aunts, we've all been now trying to recoup from all of that. But he had to survive. He had to keep us going as a family. But again, I know that. So if you're navigating your identity, get to know those little nuances and those important questions. Question number 4 that I get asked: how can we promote cultural understanding and reconciliation in today's world? That is a big one. And for me, the biggest answer to that is get ready to unlearn what you've learned. So many times people come in to trying to do this work and aren't ready to let go of what they've been taught. And you have to. Because like I just said, example with my great-grandfather. In order to survive, to keep our family going, he had to assimilate. So some things he believed, I don't want to believe anymore. We, as natives, we don't want to just assimilate. We don't want to lose our culture. We want to speak our language. We want to do our art. So I have to unlearn, which was to assimilate, and relearn. And now, so I'm relearning culture and identity. And I think all natives are going through that, no matter how connected you are, because our ancestors just had to do what they had to do to survive. And then from that point, we've got to pick up the pieces. And it's not to blame them. It's just, we know it as a fact. We know it happened. And now we can start putting the pieces back together and coming back to our original ways of being. So, to promote cultural understanding, you have to be ready to unlearn what has been taught to you and relearn it. That goes to learning history you've been taught in school, which was through a European white lens perspective. Get ready to unlearn that. Get ready to unlearn societal norms, because if you really start looking at some societal norms, it's like completely unacceptable. One I can think of is pick yourself up by your bootstraps. I think we have already been learning that and relearning that. We don't want to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps. It's not the way we should be operating for optimal health and stability. But we take that saying for granted. Like, look at our sayings and societal norms and understand where they come from. And then you're going to start getting some cultural understanding. Another way, societal norms too that pop in my mind, I'm being told, like, talk about capitalism. The whole reason America was, there's so many words coming to mind right now, as you know it, possibly, as America was discovered, which is not the correct, when the settlers came to America, capitalism, the promise of the American dream. And if you start looking into that, what did that entail and what did it mean? And what did we lose while pursuing that? And what are we still losing today in the pursuit of that? Because it sounds all positive and happy, like, oh, I'm just trying to live my American dream life. Well, you know what that really means? And what was lost in that? So, you'll start to do a lot of cultural understanding and reconciliation when you start going back to when you unlearn and relearn for yourself. And so important to do. And I do that all the time. Like I said, I became a human rights trainer, so I had to get deep into Asian history, Black history, and Hispanic history, and really understand how they were also affected. A lot of times it's easy for me to think about Native history and how we were affected. I was raised knowing that it still affects my life today. So, understanding those things will help promote reconciliation as we move forward. And the last question that I get, what role does spirituality play in your cultural identity? For me, they're the one and the same. They are so intertwined, being spiritual and being American Indian, being Washoe. Like, they are just one and the same. But Native American people tend to have a very spiritual outlook in our basis of being. So it easily connects them. I feel like that's an advantage to understanding how spirituality plays a role in my culture. This can be a huge struggle for our mainstream white culture when it's not linked in, because I'm talking about spirituality and your cultural identity, not your religion. Because you could be raised Catholic, Baptist, whatever, mainstream religion there is. But it's not about your spirituality. Spirituality, like I explained before, is your personal journey and heritage and knowledge and your connection to your higher self in the universe and to God, or whatever you may refer to as the all-being power. So, for me, it's all deeply connected, and it comes from my family telling stories. So for me, what's referred to in my world is the unseen world. So when we think about, Christians might refer to that as heaven, angels, the like, For me, being connected to the unseen world was nothing new. I was always raised with being aware of certain unseen things and to pay respect to those unseen things, and that the unseen world exists. And we know that through creation stories and the like. So it all wraps together for me. It gives me a source of strength and guidance and connection to something greater than myself, having that connection between spirituality and cultural identity. It grounds me in times of uncertainty, and it also inspires me in times of doubt. And it reminds me of the profound interconnectedness of all things. There's another tribe that I always refer back to. I heard this and I love it. It's about their language. And in their native language, they don't have masculine or feminine words. They have what we would refer to as living versus non-living words. But for them specifically translated, it's things with a spirit and things without a spirit. So for me, it's that connectedness. Like so many things that maybe the white side of my cultural identity would take for granted, the native side is just already there. Like the stone people, the plant people, the water people, like all of those things have a spirit. And that brings me back to why I'm so grounded. Because I'm thinking about rocks and dirt and plants and water and such a deeper, different level than maybe my white counterpart of the family, where they're just like, oh yeah, Earth is beautiful, and maybe they don't think about it beyond that. They might have gratitude for it, where the native side, we see the living spiritual side of those physical things. It all wraps into one. It's my cultural identity, plays a role in my spirituality. Well, it was so fun to answer those 10 questions. I hope those 10 questions got you thinking about your personal experience. Where are you at with metaphysics? Where are you at with your spiritual identity, your cultural identity? I hope you found these insights enlightening and thought-provoking. If you did, I'd like you to share anything that came up for you or that you resonate with from this talk in the comments. Please share my episodes if you enjoyed it. Tag me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok if you're sharing these. I'd love to see who's listening. Remember that the journey to self-discovery is always ongoing. So keep asking questions. That's what I was raised to do. Keep seeking answers and embrace the beauty of life's mysteries. Until next time, stay curious, stay open-minded, and stay true to yourself. This is Dr. Reverend Cope, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you for listening. Expand the life, healing, and happiness of others in your field by sharing this episode. You can get more of my content and other helpful tips by following Raven Rabbit LLC on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Be sure to comment on Spotify and answer the episode's question so I can keep creating content you love and desire. Thank you so much.